Alright guys, so I wanted to talk about this. I've looked up videos and I haven't found anything. You hear on the forums of people saying it'll fit, but I've never found an actual write-up or anything specific on how to fit a Walbro 450 in the factory housing. So I had a spare housing right here. I have the one in the car with the AEM 340. But I do need a larger pump, and I don't want to switch to the twin pumps yet. So I figured I'd buy a Walbro 450 and figure out how to make it fit in the factory housing. I've read a bunch of different things of how you have to hack up the housing and do all kinds of crazy stuff. So I wanted to see exactly what it entails to get this 450 to fit in here. And not super happy about how it is, but I only came up with 2 possible solutions, and this is probably the only one that I'm comfortable with. So I ended up obviously doing the I-wire bypass studs with a pigtail out the top, and I got the wiring you see in here, and this is going straight down into the pump. All I did was D-pin the Walbro 450 pump that comes with the factory connector, and cut the wires, crimp on a new terminal, and put it straight to there. So it's no extra connections, not using this factory connector inside here. It's just straight to the top. But I'm going to open this up. I'm going to show you what I ended up doing, and I'd like to get some comments on what people have done. I think this is the solution that's a lot of people use, but like I said, I didn't modify not one piece on this housing at all. Everything is still 100% OEM, and I can switch it back to OEM, obviously aside from the bypass studs. But even then, you can still use the factory connector, plug in your, right here, plug in your connections, and still use a factory pump back in here. But I'm going to open this up and show you what I ended up doing to get it to work. So one of the easiest ways, there's lots of ways to open these, but basically you just need to lift these tabs. I like using the zip tie because it makes it a little easier. If you can slide this up and just put this zip tie up right on the edge, just like that right there. And you can actually use one zip tie and it'll stretch across all 3. So we're gonna do that. This one's right there. So there's one. Do the second one. Just pull the tab up with your finger. Slide this up and under and on. Right there. And the third one. This one's a little more difficult because of it's recessed in there. If you have a pocket screwdriver, this is the time to use it. I don't have one on me right now, but I might have to grab one because I don't want to rip my fingernail off. But let's see if I can get this real quick. Alright. Go up, and now I can pull it up a little and get this right across. So as you can see, 1, 2, 3, and the 4th one right here, you can easily just pull on it with your finger. And since those other 3 are there, just push up on the housing and it should pop up. So, alright, so there you go, it's slid up. That's the easiest way that I found to pop these up. Using the zip tie is pretty easy, but any way you know what you need to do, you can pop those up. But so this is what I ended up doing. This is what I ended up doing to get the 450 to fit. So nothing modified in here. Still uses the factory O-ring down here in the bottom corner for this is for the transfer pump. So it needs the suction. It needs the fuel coming across it for it to suck the actual fuel from the saddle tank on the other side. So you do want that to be sealed. I believe that's where it dumps it into. But it uses the Venturi effect in order to pull some of the fuel. So one of the modifications that I've seen online is what people were saying was to trim these up a little. If you use the strainer, let me show you what the strainer looks like. So this is the, let me take it out of the package. This is the actual Walbro 450 strainer that I bought, one of their install kits. So this strainer here, you can see how thick it is. It's probably like, I don't know, maybe an inch, 3/4. But inside the strainer, I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see it because you have to zoom up pretty far. But inside the strainer, there's actually little teeth all around inside here. And they hit on this right here. So no matter how hard the fuel pump sucks up on this and it pinches it down, it will not close off the port. It leaves a small opening across the bottom for it to still suck in fuel. That's really cool. And if you try to jam this strainer in there, you are going to smash it completely down. So you're going to hinder the hole at which the Walbro 450 can actually pull in fuel. And that seems like more of an issue. So if you do the trim, like I've seen people talk about online, if you do the trim, they say like 3 millimeters, you trim up a little. You can put this on and fit the fuel pump in there, but this will be jammed completely against the bottom of the housing. So if you are comfortable with your fuel pump, you know, obviously you're doing a Walbro 450 to make a lot of power. I'm just not comfortable with how small those openings are inside there, with this plastic piece being jammed up completely against it. It could definitely cavitate. It can do some weird stuff. Definitely cause fuel pressure issues if you do that. And the other part of trimming these here is you are letting this port, you are letting this piece right here come up off that O-ring about the same amount. So probably like half of it. It probably still works, but it definitely would be worrisome of it not pulling fuel from one side of the tank into the housing here and keeping it filled. So that's one modification. What I ended up doing on this one was I ended up putting a spacer on the bottom of the fuel pump. So it's not going to have a strainer on it at all. But you still have the factory fuel filter right here that it goes into. There is some debris that I've seen inside this little canister here when pulling fuel pumps, but more than likely there's not going to be much debris coming into here. But even if there is debris that gets sucked into here and it does potentially hurt this pump, these pumps are like $150. It's not that much money. But by doing this, you can see this spacer right here. This is actually the spacer that goes on your factory fuel pump right on the top. Let me see. So this is a DW300. So this spacer right here is actually the spacer that slides right here on the top. And you normally slide that spacer on. You can do the double O-ring and push it in. And obviously these tabs right here, this one and this one, are what actually clip it in place so that it can't push out. So from my experience of at least watching people that have and heard people talk about their 450s, the Walbro 450 does not have the clips on the side to actually lock in on right here on the sides. So what I ended up doing was with this spacer on the bottom, this Walbro right now is pushed in, double O-ringed. I do have a piece of rubber hose to act as a spacer like this, and then the double O-ring on top, and then it presses all the way in. And what this spacer is going to do though is when you close this housing, it pushes up right against it. So when you close it up, you can feel right here a little bulge, and I had to put a flashlight in there so you can actually see where it touches. You can see like the black marks. So I was doing testing of different things. I was trying different lengths to try to get it right where it was no space at all in here. But what I came to find out was the factory little spacer off of your fuel pump will work perfect. When you put it right in here, this one actually pressed in pretty good. I just sanded down one side and it actually presses right in and locks in. So it can't come out because there's a little nipple. You can see that silverish nipple right there. So it can't slide out. Once you press it in, this is not going to move anywhere. It can't get sucked up. It can't block this or anything. But what that ends up doing is, the bigger concern is, it gives you, if the plastic goes straight across, it gives you a lot of room to actually suck in fuel. Granted, it's not going to have a filter, a strainer at least on it here, but it will filter it before it goes down to your injectors. So, but with the housing sitting right here, that's a larger area for it to actually suck in fuel into there. I know there is some benefits to, well, at least from what I read, there's some benefits of this kind of helping the fuel go in a certain direction. But honestly, it's going to suck in the fuel no matter what. It's going to be completely submerged in it. I don't think that's going to be an issue. But like I said, nothing's modified on the housing. I didn't have to modify the hangers or anything. It's a very tight fit. But what I've heard online is, when you run these 450s, the people that have put them in and feel like, because it is pretty snug, and if I pull on it, it doesn't want to come out, but I can yank it hard enough to pull it out, is when they run high pressure, a lot of pressure in here, that the pumps can kick themselves out. So the biggest problem is it trying to kick itself out. And by me putting this spacer on here, this is going to jam it completely back in. And this housing is going to be the lock that essentially holds that all the way up. And by it holding itself all the way up, there is physically no possible way for that 450 to kick itself back out of the double O-ring up here. So I felt like that was a safer bet to do. And like I said, obviously the two wires here, they're hardwired straight up to the pins here. But this is to me, this is the safer route. As much as I don't want to damage the pump by having debris come in here from the fuel, that's going to be a lot safer than, to me personally, I mean, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. That's going to be safer than pinching down this filter and having the pump try to suck through these very small holes that are inside here. I don't know if, there you can see a little bit in the camera right there. So as much as I want to have this filtration on there, you can see the height difference. If I was to put that on there, there's it's a very, not the greatest lighting. Let me see if I can turn on the light. No, I can't. But it's a decent height difference. Yeah, it's, I mean, it's that probably that 3 millimeters that people were talking about, but I do not want to pinch the fuel pump real tight against the housing. So this is the method that I ended up doing, doing the double O-ring. I ended up taking some of the, I took some of the length off of the 450 end here, probably like a 1/4 inch or so, because it's so long of a nipple on there. You don't need all of that, and it let the pump sit even deeper into the housing and really lock in. And it's kind of hard to see here, but the pump is fully seated down. The pump is fully seated down on, as far as it would on here. Like it's all the way bottomed out on here. So it has some good, basically some good penetration into the actual hole where the fuel pump seals. So it's double O-ringed. It's sitting pretty far in there. The hose that's on there is helping as well, push it all the way up. So this is, to me, at least the best method of doing this Walbro 450. And like I said, I haven't seen anyone write any write-ups or anything, and a lot of it is because there's no good way of putting this pump in there. It's just too big of a pump. Like I said, you can make it work, and that was my two options that at least I came up with. If you have another way of making this fit better, I would definitely be interested in hearing how you made it fit. But that was my two options, was either one, run this spacer, with no sock filter on it and have this housing hold it up and that pump will never kick out. It'll be in there pretty solid, and have this hookup go back in the factory spot, everything function just like it's supposed to. Or you cut the tabs on these ones here, you cut them down, cut them up, I should say, cut them up like 3 mils and take that off completely all the way around, and put the stock filter on it and push it all the way up as high as you can, and it is what it is. But what that does is it potentially could hurt the siphon here. Any leakage there is going to obviously ruin the whole Venturi effect of it doing what it's supposed to do. All right, so we're going to snap this together so you can see how it goes back together. And like I said, with that spacer, it's still a tight fit, but not so much that it just is ridiculous tight. But so it's not recommended for everyone, but in my case, I am running to a point where my 340 is starting to run out of steam. Even though it's hardwired, I'm starting to lose fuel pressure towards the higher RPM on E85 only. So this is something I want to try, and let's see how it works out. But as you can see, slides right back together. Bam, clip, 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 and that's clipped. And I'll get a light so you can see what I'm talking about. But if you put a light right there, you can see that spacer is pressed right against the bottom. So so that right there is going to keep, not only is it keeping a space underneath for the fuel pump to be able to suck in any fuel that's in here, but it's also keeping the tension up on the pump so that it can't push itself back out. Because like I said before, that Walbro 450 does not have these teeth right here to lock itself in so that it can't push itself out. So if you run enough pressure, and most people that are running a Walbro 450 are definitely going to be, even if you use factory 43.5 psi for Subarus, if you're running, you know, 30 pounds of boost, or potentially less if you're on a rotated, but let's just say a stock location turbo, you're in the neighborhood of 25 to 30 pounds, you're going to be upwards of, you know, 70, 75, 80 pounds of pressure. That pump will try to kick itself out. And for me personally, I would just rather have the pump not be able to kick itself out. These pumps, this one right here specifically, can flow, I believe the pressure switch is 135 psi, and it'll definitely flow the fuel that I need with ease. So this is my solution on how to get the Walbro 450 to fit. If anyone else has some modification that they did, I'd definitely be interested in seeing how they fit it in there. But like I said, I haven't seen anyone, other than saying they have a Walbro 450, I've never seen anyone actually show how to fit them in the housing. This right here is, my opinion, the safest way to put the 450 in there. Having that spacer is going to make sure the pump doesn't kick out, which is one of the bigger problems that I've heard. Not running a sock filter, not the biggest concern to me, because once again, I still have the factory filter right here that the pump is pushing the fuel through. So that will catch some stuff before it ever goes up into the front of the fuel system. So not ideal. I do have the sock. I would like to fit it in there, but I'm just not comfortable jamming this piece all against itself and trying to have this filter flow, you know, upwards of 450, 400 liters per hour through those small holes right there. So that's more of my concern. They're not even that deep. Like, I can push on this sock right here and feel like, I would imagine those pieces are probably sticking out a millimeter or two. So I mean, just think of like the size of that hole. It's not a big hole to pull in that much fuel. I'm more concerned about getting this fuel into that pump, letting it suck in as much as it wants and pressurize it. The filtration is going to be done right here, and it's going to go to the front of the car, and I can still utilize all the factory lines, and that'll give me the extra fuel that I need. And obviously, don't run the 450 off the factory plug, you're going to melt this housing. It melts on a factory plug, factory fuel pump. So do the stud bypass here and alleviate that problem of potentially melting the pins, because this 450 is supposed to pull some major amps. I think from what I had seen, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of like 20 amps, 25 amps. They can pull some decent amps. It's not a weak pump. This thing is strong and it pulls a lot of juice. So ideally, twin 340s is probably the best route to go, but obviously if you do the twin 340s, you're going to do the radium hanger, which then you need to put a new filter somewhere in the system because it deletes your factory filter here. So I just figured I'd try it. I like to try all the options. I've tried all kinds of motor options, so I wanted to try to fit the 450 in here and get my own opinion of how it fits and if I'm comfortable running it or not. And I bought the pump just to try it out, and I'm doing this method right here with the spacer underneath so the pump can't physically kick out, other than it getting some debris that's going to be in the bottom of this canister. I don't have any issues with anything that I see right here. So the only issue I had trying to make this work was pinching off the inlet of the pump, and that was a bigger concern to me, because that would defeat the whole point of putting a larger pump if you can't actually get the fuel volume in there. And that would probably lead to extremely high amp loads of the fuel pump trying to suck through a smaller opening. And from what I read, there was people that had burned out multiple Walbros doing it in the factory housing, but they were using the method of cutting 3mm up, and they were probably running the sock filter on it, and by pinching it down here, that is probably the reason of why they ended up burning the Walbro out, is by it just trying to suck through the small openings and just pulling so much amps and just getting so hot. So for me personally, this is probably the better route. Obviously not ideal for everyone, but in my scenario, I think I'm going to run with this, and we're going to try this 450 out and see if that alleviates the problem that I'm having of fuel pressure dropping off at higher RPM. Yeah, I mean, this pump should be able to do everything that the 340 cannot. So if I can utilize the factory housing, I'm okay running this like this. Yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. I don't mind answering anything. Like I said, this is not like 100% drop-in replaceable like the traditional Dietzworks AEMs. They clip in, you got your sock, and there's 100% OEM functionality. This is not going to have the sock on it, obviously, like I said, but like I said, for me personally, I don't want that pump to be struggling to try to breathe, and by running that factory sock on it and trimming these so that this housing can sit up higher is going to do exactly that. And I think that's going to cause more of an issue than me just sucking in fuel without a sock on it. So probably not the best opinion. I'm sure people are going to have their own thoughts on that, but this is the best way, in my opinion, to run the 450 in the housing. It does fit. You don't have to modify anything on the housing at all. You just cannot run a strainer on the bottom unless there's a low profile. If there's a low profile strainer, extremely low profile, I'd definitely be interested in seeing that. But this is the only one. This is the Walbro one that comes in their install kit. But and let's see. This is the part number that I got when I ordered the kit, which came with that strainer, came with this right here, pigtail. But yeah, other than that, like I said, this is what I'm going to run, and this should do just fine. And we'll see if I have any issues. I'll definitely keep everyone updated on that, because it's kind of a big jump. You either go 1/340, or if you can't do the Walbro 450, I mean, your next step is twin pumps, or the new housing. You got the there's other people that make the housing. Dietzworks actually make one where they utilize I think they changed this whole bottom half, but the big problem is you lose the factory filter here, so you have to run a filter in your somewhere in your fuel system before it gets to the injectors and the rails. So I wanted to utilize the factory filter. So this is what I ended up doing. And yeah, I'm going to toss this in the car and drive around on it. We'll see on the logs how everything looks. If the fuel's a lot better, then we're going to rock with this. But I have an extra housing, so the other housing has a 340. I'm going to keep that one on hand just in case I ever need to switch back to it. But at the power level that I'm at, I'm starting to see that 340 starting to fall off. So this is my solution to addressing that. So I just want to make a little video showing that the 450 does fit, how it fits, how I made it fit. Yeah, I mean, any other questions, I can definitely go deeper into it, but that is factory housing, clips all the way back together. You can't even tell, and has that spacer, just no sock on it. So that was my solution to this problem. So, all right.